means that there's also a lot of of bacteria and bacterial strains across the United States that come together and are merging and interacting with one another, and dominant strains, new strains are hitting immune systems that aren't really ready for it. People are hit by multiple things at once, and so there's an aspect of this that is much like what people feared the airport would be. The fact that one person could get sick, go to an airport, transmit it to a bunch of people, and then it'd be all over the world in a few days, and plagues could spread horribly. We haven't really seen those problems. It's the subject of a movie like 12 Monkeys, but um, I'm not actually sure what what people who track that kind of thing, what they've noticed post mass transportation. Anyway, there's at these gatherings there's a large concern about reducing the spread of pathogens and disease, right? So whereas at the airport, people are in and out, this is a gathering where people live at for days and days. They eat, they they eat and shit together, and live in an environment that a lot of people aren't really used to. They're not used to thinking of hygiene and keeping their hygiene without their shower that is right next to them in their house. So people are dealing with kind of an increased risk of pathogens and bacteria when they don't really have they have a limited capacity to keep themselves clean. They have to learn new methods of keeping themselves clean. So that's kind of the situation here, and the result is that a lot of people do get sick despite people's best efforts. And the best efforts are pretty intense, I'd say. There are signs everywhere. People are encouraging others to wash their hands. There are multiple hand washing stations. Another thing, people bring their own silverware and their own bowls with them, and so everyone's responsible for cleaning their own items for cleaning themselves, and it's up to you. There's no large body that's really looking over you or getting you in trouble if you don't. You just get sick. It's the law of nature more. Um, so so yeah, the kitchens are pretty amazing. I kind of talked about those, but so that's the setup. That's what happens, and now I'm kind of interested in the theoretics behind this, in what's behind it all, and so hey, I'm just recording. So I've been looking up the philosophy of poison, food poisoning, and things like that, and either my collection is not very complete, or else there aren't really a lot of people that think about that. I have a pretty big library of philosophers, and I search that database rather than searching the internet. The internet is kind of too big, so recently, for a lot of my research, I just search my own collections, and I'm surprised at how little philosophy there is. That there are interesting links to philosophy. Plato or Socrates was, famously drank the hemlock preparation, and you know, intentional, like poisons with food, or poisoning your husband and poisoning your wife and poisoning your children. Poisoning people is different than these kind of unintended consequences of food poisoning. Let's see. So food poisoning and disease. So that's the thing. When you're at a gathering and you get sick, it's hard to know what you get sick from. We're not really in. I mean, there are a lot of people who volunteer and are doctors, but they're not really I don't know. It just seems like because you're outside of the system, there's like less there's there's less that you know. Even though in a normal society, I don't think you know that much either. You just kind of assume everybody else knows. But here, most people don't really have that faith or belief that other people do know the problems. So, so when I was there, a lot of people in my group got sick one night, and the symptoms were an incredible amount of lethargy. Like people were almost moving in slow motion and puking. I also heard some pretty. I could hear the signs of this kind of going through the population. And you walk around and in tents, you'll hear somebody coughing pretty violently, and then I saw signs like similar signs in my own camp, and that let me know there's this kind of problem. I heard other information that there were a lot of people that got sick after one night. Um, so this is interesting. Let's see. So in a little bit of my research and talking to some coworkers and friends, learned the concept of Mithridization, which comes from Mithridates or something. I kind of forgot his info, but he was one of the first people that he feared being poisoned. So, like in The Princess Bride, he fed himself small amounts of poison and increased those amounts until he was essentially immune to being poisoned. So that's what Mithridization is. And I wonder if things like if this kind of thing acts out in the gathering, where people who are much more actively involved in the gathering actually get increased immunities to all these different pathogens and bacteria that are coming from all around the United States. This is a gathering that has a core people that, and then tons of other subcultures all over the place: train hoppers, punk kids, hippies, glitter glam people, chocolate lovers. Anyway, tons and tons of different subcultures and people that come to this from all walks of life. So I'm wondering how much things like kind of staying dirty to make yourself immune to these things gives a certain sense of I guess respect in the culture. I feel like I'm part of it, but I'm also very confused by it and trying to learn about this system of people. Um, I had a friend that was talking to some other people that said, oh, they don't get sick because they dumpster dive all the time, and they're already used to these kinds of things. So that's kind of in the system, and it's similar to the biological concept of like the handicap principle, which was, I guess, pioneered by Zahavi, a couple pair, and they noticed things like in the ant colony, or they make the argument that the pheromonal communication systems that happen within ant colonies, the royal pheromones are actually royal pheromones because they're poisons, and so the queen can withstand a great deal of this poison, and because she can, that somehow gives her legitimacy within this system, and so then other organisms, not other organisms, but the clone female ants, and then like also pass this poison along, like this excitement, like I can carry this poison. And that's also something that they see happens within our cells. So cell communication occurs along poisonous lines. Like large amounts of these poisons within the system actually can kill the cell, but small amounts are used for communication in some way that says, oh, I am fit enough, I can handle this poison. That means that I'm a reliable messenger. I'm not just faking, I'm not like barely in, I'm not just hanging off on the side, because if I was, that little bit of poison would be enough to take me down. And so I wonder if there's, I'm just kind of looking for theoretical links to food poisoning within social systems. And it's not necessarily food poisoning, but that's one of the potential it's one of the suspects, right? It could be bacterial. It could just be people being sick, flus, viruses, things like that. But it comes from the food. Sometimes it comes from the food. So there's one idea. And as you can see, this is still quite disorganized. I'm hoping that something will come out of it. But, let's see, poisons. It's like... Oh, and one other thought is that food poisoning tends to sound like something like a way that you can use to disrespect a group. Like if their dirtiness is linked to like delegitimization. If somebody, you basically tell people off by calling them dirty, and it's one accusation that's levied against hippies all the time. And dirty people, also immigrants. Most immigrants coming into America were labeled as dirty little this or that, as Florence King writes. So the dirtiness can be actioned, and the food poisonings and the diseases can be seen as evidence that a group is diseased and horrible and despicable and thus should be shunned. So without understanding, it's easy to forget how often food poisonings and really bad epidemics happen within the food system of the United States. And these things happen all the time. I was looking up on a website that tracks this stuff, and there are outbreaks happening almost, every week, and other bad things. So that's kind of interesting. So many people in the first world are very quick to discredit other people for, to say that, oh, you're dirty little so-and-sos, when actually their own idealized food system has a lot of problems, has a lot of similar problems. So that, I think, complicates this little this scenario. I don't know. So I don't know, if I was hoping that this video would lend some new ideas and thoughts. Perhaps it has shown me where the edges of this subject lie for me at this moment. And so that's where I'm going to sign off. Hello, goodbye.